So greetings from Pennsylvania once again on an absolutely beautiful February morning here. Today's February 11th, and it's going to be up to like 55 degrees today. I mean, it's not that right now, but it's going to be just amazing today. So we're going to make the most of this day. Absolutely beautiful day. But in this video, we're going to be telling the story of Fort Bigham in our French and Indian War series. Of course, we came across that marker. We were filming one of our other French and Indian War videos, and because I looked it up, and there's indeed a story to tell about Fort Bigham. Rather tragic story, but a story nonetheless to tell about. So I'm currently at another location here first. I'm filming a number of things today since it's such a beautiful day. Actually, this location is pretty awesome too. You'll probably see that in the next video. But anyway, we're gonna head to the historical marker first, the one that we saw a number of videos ago when we filmed, I think, Fort Patterson and Fort Granville. We'll visit that marker again, and then we'll head to the older stone marker, and then along the way, I'll tell you a little bit of the story. So let's get on with this journey. So here is that marker for Fort Bigham once again. The site of the stockaded blockhouse is a few miles west, a little bit more than a few miles. Destroyed by the Indians in 1756. Of course, we found this marker when we did Fort Patterson, which was down that way in the town of Mexico. So as I mentioned earlier, we're now going to drive to the site of Fort Bigham, and I'll tell you a little bit of the story on the way there. I'll set up the dash cam, we'll drive together as I tell a little bit of the story, and I'll finish the story at the site of Fort Bigham itself, where the older stone marker is located. So let's get going. So we are now on Route 75 south, heading out of the town of Port Royal, heading more of like in a southwest direction on our way to Fort Bigham, which is actually about at least 10 miles away from the marker that we saw just back there, which is actually at the junction of Route 75 and what's called the William Penn Highway on the east side of Port Royal. And I'm filming a number of other videos today, so I'll be stopping at some other places too along the way. But not you won't see that in this video though. So yeah, Fort Bigham was not one of the officially commissioned forts by the government of Pennsylvania, but it was one of those set up by the settlers for protection. Built around 1754, and on June 11th of 1756, it was the fateful day for Fort Bigham. Before I talk a little bit more about it, I do want to mention another website. There's a guy he calls himself the Pennsylvania Rambler, and he does like blogs. He writes about his adventures on his website, and I learned a lot about this fort from his site. Actually, I've been to a number of his blogs. He does kind of similar thing to I do, but he writes about his stuff rather than making videos. So you can learn a lot. If you're interested in this kind of stuff and Pennsylvania history, you might be interested in looking up his site. It's called the Pennsylvania Rambler. I'll probably put a little name for it down at the bottom of the screen there for you. So I just want to give him a little shout out there. So we'll start our story with two men, John Gray and Francis Innes. Like I said, I got some of this information from the Pennsylvania Rambler and several other sites, but mostly from his site. And they were on their way home, head back to the area where Fort Bigham was located. Oh, I should mention, if I haven't mentioned already, we are in Juniata County. I'm not sure if I threw a map up yet or not, but that's where we are. Yeah, and they saw smoke rising up from where the fort was located, so they figured trouble was a-brewing, and sure enough it was. But according to the story, John was thrown from his horse and had to go find his horse before he can continue on to the fort, and in some ways that kind of saved his life, but he still had kind of a tragic story for him anyway. Francis got home in time to get to his family, but in the end he ended up getting captured with his wife and a couple of kids. We'll talk about his story a little bit later too then. But John didn't make it back home or to the fort in time to help his wife and daughter Jane, who I think was only 3 years old at the time. So they were taken into captivity. Initially they were taken out to not Fort Kittanning, but the Indian town of Kittanning, and then later on they were taken to Fort Duquesne. And from there they were kind of parceled out to the other Indians who adopted some of them, as the custom was with these captivities. Alright, well, I just got done taking a little bit of a detour, filmed a few other locations, filmed an Indian mound and also the longest remaining covered bridge in Pennsylvania. Two pretty cool spots. Now we're back on 75. Trying to make our way to the old stone marker, which marks roughly where the place where this fort stood, or this place of refuge, I should call it. Yes, I think I mentioned about 22 people were taken captive or killed in this attack on the fort that took place. I think they found some bones in the ruins of the fort, so some people burned to death in the fort. And this attack occurred at the same time in June of 1756 as when Fort Granville fell. We filmed that video with Fort Patterson. Of course, both Fort Patterson and Fort Granville were attacked. Patterson survived, but Granville fell. And that's where Colonel Armstrong's brother, Edward Armstrong, was killed. Most of these attacks were under the supervision, I guess you could say, of someone known as Chief Shingas, or sometimes he's called King Beaver. He was known by a number of different names. I'm going to do a separate video just on him someday. An interesting character. Shingas. I think one record said they were trying to attack another place called another fort, but they didn't have much success there, so they came and attacked this one, Fort Bigham. Yeah, but Francis, looked back to some of our story. Francis, like I said, him and his wife were taken captive and their 3 children, and they were taken up to Montreal. A bunch of the others were taken, like I said, out to Kittanning and then to Fort Duquesne, but they were taken up to Montreal. But unfortunately, one tragic story is that as they were crossing the frozen lakes, one of the youngest child got sick and was kind of holding everybody up. So, yeah, the Indians kind of opened up a hole in the ice and pushed the kid into the ice, so he was under the ice, and that's how they got rid of him. So, not sure if they did that when he was alive or if he had already perished, but either way, it's a pretty tragic way to get rid of somebody. But yeah, the parents, Francis and his wife, were freed once they got to Montreal, but the kids were kept as captives and not returned until 1764. So that's their story. When we get to the historical marker, the site of Fort Bigham, we'll talk about what happened to John and his wife and their daughter Jane. It's kind of a sad story too. I mean, a little few bright spots, but overall it's kind of a sad story. John, even though his wife was returned, John never did see her again after she was taken captivity. Like I said, we'll wait to talk about that. He did everything he could to find her, I'll just say that, before we get to the spot. Yeah, so like I said, at this point I'm just kind of keeping my eyes open for what's called Mountain Road. It'll come in on our left at a sharp angle, and the marker will be on our right at the end of like a farm lane. You know, I love researching and finding out about these stories. It just adds so much. Actually, right here it is. Yeah, to our left is Mountain Road. I'm gonna finish what I'm saying. Yeah, I love just researching and finding out about the history of these places. It's just really awesome. All right, here we are. Yeah, so here is the old stone marker. 58 rods. There's a measurement for you. 58 rods northwest. This marked Fort Bigham, erected in 1754 by pioneer settlers, captured and burned by Indians on June 11th of 1756. 20 or more persons in the fort were massacred or carried away. This mentioned being rebuilt in 1760, but destroyed in 1766. That date's probably wrong. It could be more likely 1764 during Pontiac's War. The inhabitants, warned by a friend, reply Indian escaped. All right. So let's finish out this story, talk about John and his wife. And yes, I don't have my hat on. Some of you probably never see me without my hat on. I left it on top of the Jeep when I pulled out of the last location, and now it's who knows where it is, but I probably don't need to wear one all the time anyway. just kind of got in the habit of doing so when I film. All right, but yeah, let's talk about John and his wife. Of course, she was one of those that's captured and taken to not Fort Kittanning, but the city of Kittanning, which was an Indian village in what is now Armstrong County, but later taken to Fort Duquesne. Now, John thought she was still at Kittanning, the Indian village, and when Colonel John Armstrong went on what's called the Kittanning expedition to try and subdue the Indians and to traffic go, and to try and take down that Indian city, John went along in hopes of finding his wife on that raid, but she wasn't there. Unbeknownst to him, she had already been taken to Fort Duquesne. So that's kind of a sad aspect of it. I mean, I kind of admire her husband for doing that, to try to rescue her, to go take part in that expedition to the city of Kittanning, or the village of Kittanning. But like I said, she wasn't there. She was released in 1764 after Pontiac's War, but her husband had died. John had died previous to that. So even though she was eventually released, they never did get to meet again. And another little piece of sadness is that we have no idea what happened to the daughter, Jane, the daughter of John and his wife. She was never heard from again, because she was only 3 years old. She was probably separated from her mom, probably given to another Indian family. So she kind of disappeared from history. But the mom, one little bright piece of information, the mom did take in or adopt another little girl that had been taken captive, a little girl whose parents never reclaimed her or didn't even know she had been returned. So she kind of kidnapped, adopted that little girl. Just one last look at that marker. Of course, up here, right up in these fields somewhere is where Fort Bigham was located. Not sure if they know the exact location. All right. All right, so as always, thanks for coming along and listening to our little adventure, a little French and Indian War story. I have another one to tell today, too, in a separate video, the story of what's called Fort Robinson, but I'll tell that in another video.